everyone. It's been a while since I've recorded. I don't actually remember when I last recorded, and this one certainly wasn't planned, like the majority. But I felt like it was important to kind of record where I'm at and thoughts to share. So as always, disclaimers are in the comments. I do talk about things that are very sensitive and might be triggering for some, if not many, so please always care for yourself and make sure that you're in a good place when watching any kind of content or reading any kind of content that might be triggering for you. So since this isn't pre-planned, I don't really have anything written down or any guides to follow, but I just kind of want to talk about, in a sense, not my day, but an interaction I had that really kind of brought a lot of things together. And part of the reason I haven't been recording is because I felt like I've been sharing a lot of what is wrong, bringing to light DVI, PV abuse, child neglect, all of those things, sexual assault. But it almost feels like, not only when I record them, but then, when people view them, like, okay, great, but like, what am I supposed to do with this? What am I supposed to do with this information, right? And like, in my mind, it was at least bringing about that awareness, but then there was no follow through of like what you're supposed to do with this information. And I don't have the answers to that necessarily, because I think every situation is different, but I am working on solutions that people can partake in, and those will be shared. So what I wanted to go through today is kind of some realizations I had and how I got there. So to give a little history on, I guess, my career background, and that seems like ridiculous, like, why are we talking about your career? Well, because it's actually relevant. So I was an investigator, a corporate investigator, for quite a long time. I did a lot of different kinds of investigations. I never realized that at some point I would be gathering my own evidence for my own cases and fighting for my own freedom and the freedom and protection of my children and justice for myself and my family and my friends and, victims who are, and will be. I didn't realize that, but I loved being an investigator. I loved the science behind it, the human behavior component. And I did it for almost a decade. I mean, I got to senior management level. I did theft, fraud, workplace violence, assault, missing persons, insider threat activity, counterintelligence, all sorts of things. And it got to this point where I didn't want to be on the end of reactivity anymore. I didn't want to just be catching people doing things. Now, I guess there was always the thrill of catching people, if you will, but what was really, really disheartening to me is when I would go into, interviews and interrogations, I would talk to some who were just guilty. They knew that what they were doing was wrong, and they just really didn't care, or they did it for whatever reason they felt they needed to do it for, wanted to do it for. So there were these people. There were then other people who either they felt trapped or they just didn't know. They had no clue that what they were doing was wrong. Maybe they were just trying to work around something to get their job done. Maybe they didn't have the resources that they needed, and so they just kind of came up with their own resources. And this really hurt my soul. It hurt my soul because these were good people who were losing their jobs, and it was very clear that they had no clue that they were doing something wrong. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, and we were talking about reactivity versus proactivity, and he said to me, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it struck me, and I was like, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it really resonated with me. And at that point I decided, I want to be on the side of prevention. I want to move upstream in security, which is what I do now. And I want to work on teaching people who just don't know the mistakes that they're making so that they don't make those mistakes. Now, what does that do? Well, it saves people from losing their jobs because they just make mistakes. It teaches people how to protect themselves at work and at home. It's very freeing of like time and resources for, you know, investigations downstream to actually figure out who is doing this stuff intentionally. So that's how I got to my role that I'm currently in, although it's morphed over time as I've built it out, as the leader of awareness. So now I train and develop communications and awareness campaigns and trainings for security. And I teach people how to make good decisions, basically how to know when a mistake is about to be made to prevent the mistake from being made. Okay, so this is like my background. It, you know, very high level. My background is quite extensive, you know, professionally, educationally, and personally. But this is my my background in my professional life. It's kind of the same as my education. I very much I got one of my bachelor's in applied biological sciences, wildlife evolutionary ecology, and I got my master's in sustainable management. But all of these, even my evolutionary ecology, I focused on learning from the past and then applying those learnings to today, to prevent recurrence. Even in sustainable management is all about, I call it tree hugging business, but it's all about business operations and making sure that it's sustainable over time, not only to keep the business going, but also sustainable for the earth, right? And sustainable for people. It's called the triple bottom line, you know, people, planet, and profit. So it's all about learning from, you know, historical mistakes of companies and businesses that damage the environment and damaged people, so that business can function smarter, more ethically, and well into the future. So we get the theme, right? A lot of this prevention, a lot of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but I didn't realize that I was kind of living that existence until today. So today I was talking to someone, and in a sense, an interview, right? And this was a very difficult interview because, like I've said a million times to a bunch of people, and I think probably even in videos, when you say, or you hear someone say, hindsight is 2020. Hindsight with this for me has not been 2020. Hindsight has been 4K, the most like highest definition television, virtual reality, like whatever you can imagine in your mind as the most crystal clear, crisp, like vision, like, or view, that is this. So when I go back in time, everything in my mind is so crystal clear, but at the time it wasn't. And so it's very, very difficult. It's very shame producing for me when I go through this. And so this individual was asking me, it was in regards to my abusive ex-spouse, which these videos are about, and my experiences in that abusive relationship and marriage. And this individual asked me to explain like how we met. And I knew where I was going to go. She didn't, but I knew where I was going to go. And I immediately got hot and embarrassed, and my chest started flushing. My lupus malaria rash started coming out. My blood pressure went up. My arrhythmia that I'm going to have to get surgery for, or, you know, a procedure for that he caused, is, you know, it starts going off. And the reason why is because had I known then what I knew now, or know now, I would not be making these videos. I would not have been in that situation. I would have never let myself get into that. Or so I think, right? Like, because I want to say that, but I don't know. I would think so. But here's what ended up happening. So I meet this individual. I met through a friend, a mutual friend that I was very close with, and I still am. And I had just gotten out of a relationship. I had just gotten, I had gotten married when I really didn't, well, I really never got, I didn't get married either time, but I had just gotten divorced, and I had had a really, really, like, just kind of a rough life, and a lot of feelings of inadequacy and feelings of never being good enough. You know, I modeled for, I don't even know, I think like 5 years or something like that. And it was just such a gross existence, because you would go to these, I called them cattle calls. They're called casting calls. And now this is many, 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 many years ago. I have no idea what modeling is like these days. I don't know what it's like. I have no idea, but this is, 20 years ago. And you would take these composite cards, like these pictures of yourself and like your measurements and stuff like that. And you would go to these cattle calls, and they would literally just like look at your composite cards and look at you. And I had experiences where they actually circled what was wrong with me. So like they would say like, oh, your this is too small, your this is too big, your hair is too short, your hair is too long, your eyes are too brown, your eyes are too blue. I'm like, my eyes aren't blue. Just all of this ridiculous stuff. And it just destroyed my self-esteem. I lost my athletics career to an injury. Like, my self-esteem was gone. My purpose for existence was gone. Everything I wanted to do, I couldn't do anymore. It was just really, really hard. And then I went through this, marriage, and that failed. Good riddance. That failed. But I had my beautiful child, but then I became a single mom. And so now I'm trying to figure out what happened, right? Like, it's kind of like a car crash. You're just like, whoa, what happened? Like, we were here, and then we were over here. And it was very difficult to deal with and emotionally cope with. And I didn't really understand. I was so young. I didn't understand my purpose. And I didn't understand that I didn't need to know my purpose. And it seemed like everybody had their shit together. And I was like, well, I don't know what's going on. And so I reached out to my friend, and I basically expressed that, like, I was lonely, and I wasn't really looking for a relationship, but something. And so she ended up introducing me via text message, via messaging, to this individual who was the best friend of her boyfriend at the time. And she thought he was a good enough guy. And honestly, like, she wouldn't know any different anyway. And so we're texting for a while, and I go to meet him at a restaurant bar that had volleyball, because that's the sport that I play, and he played it as well. My mutual friend played it as well. Her boyfriend played it as well. It's a huge community. So here's where things start to go south. I noticed that at this tournament kind of thing, which is it's a volleyball court and kind of like an extra lot of this like bar in the city that I live, and I noticed that when we're sitting there, he's just kind of an ass, but it's kind of compelling, and I like a good challenge, and I go, this guy's kind of a jerk, but you can tell that he's kind of guarded, and he's just kind of like I'm just gonna keep to myself, like, I'm just gonna be a jerk, and and this is what I'm used to doing to, like, keep people at arm's length. Well, I understand this, because I kind of do the same thing. What I didn't know at the time is that his perspective of reality was incredibly different than my perspective of reality. His perspective of reality is, I do this to be self-serving. My perspective of reality is, I do the same thing to protect myself and others. Very different. So this person asks me how we met, and I'm explaining this story. And as I get closer to what I'm about to say now, or next, I start to get even more hot. I'm very blotchy. I might even be blotchy right now. I'm not sure. But what I go on to say is that as he's being the gentleman he, of course, is, and is walking me out to my car, he decides that that's a good place to go on ahead and have a first time in the parking lot of, like, a strip mall in front of a bar that has a volleyball court in the back. Now, I will say, I did not do anything. I was very adamant that was absolutely not going to happen. I was not doing that, but he persisted and insisted. And even though I was able to be like, I gotta go, I gotta go do something. I don't even know what I made up at that point. I was like, I have to go. Here's where I went wrong. My low self-esteem, now I'm speaking for myself, my low self-esteem, my loneliness, my fear of being a single mother and not being able to provide for my child, my lack of self-awareness, all of these things, I convinced myself that he did this because I was desirable. And man, did that feel good to be desirable, to be desired by someone, to feel like I was worth something to someone. And it was wrong. It was a wrong thought, but it wasn't wrong of me to think those things. It was just not the accurate thought. But that's what I told myself. Okay. So then we fast forward. And right then, again, hindsight's 4K. Right then, I should have been like, nope, absolutely not. But I didn't. Right? Because I was desired. That's what it was. I was just he was so enamored with my existence that's why he was doing this. And what control I had to say no and actually be able to go away, and have this chase. I was so wrong. I was so wrong. And the thing is there is shame in it, and there is a level of embarrassment. But here's the thing. I forgive myself. I forgive my younger self. I forgive my broken self, the self that I needed to fix, the self that I needed to find. I forgive all of that, because at the end of the day, no matter what I was feeling, no matter what I was experiencing, no matter what I was thinking, no matter what I was convincing myself was going on that wasn't going on, that was a choice that individual made to treat me that way. And I know that that's a super controversial thing that people are like, oh, well, you make the choice. No. Unless you are actually an assault survivor, unless you are actually an abuse survivor, you have no clue. And so if you're a person that watches this, or you hear someone who says oh, well, they chose that because they didn't do this, that, what they were wearing. No. They'll say that until it becomes them. Until they're that person, or they are that person and they haven't come to the realization that no combination of words, no combination of statements, no combination of sweet smiles, kissy faces, winks, no combination of any of that from either party justifies one of the parties taking advantage of another. Just like there is no combination of words or insults or offensive things that could ever be said that would justify someone physically harming another human being. I don't care how many times you hear, oh my God, they upset me. No. You are in control of your emotions. You are in control of your actions and reactions. So if you at any point hear someone say oh, well, it was their fault that I did this, that I assaulted them, unless you are literally purely acting in self-defense against certain harm, no, nope. I don't care who you are. Even me. Nope. Not a thing. So I convinced myself that I'm just desirable. And then I end up going on a trip with this individual and the two other individuals through whom I met him. And it gets worse. And it gets worse, right? I can't go into extraneous details because there are things at play that some things just need to be kept to myself. But things actually got worse. And so as I'm telling this individual who is, having this conversation with me about this, I realized that only a month in, not even a month after this event in the parking lot, and still this whole thing happening, not even a month later, I experienced my first narcissistic abuse cycle. Kid you not. So all of these terrible things happen. And I am oh no, I am not doing this. I am not doing this. And I was very clear on this, but I was in a place where I couldn't go back home on my own. So I had to wait. And the morning that we were leaving, even though everything he had done and every horrible thing he had said and every horrible action he had taken and everything he had done, he knew how to get me and dropped right into the sob stories. The sob stories about his childhood, his upbringing, that he had lost one of his parents after they, abandoned him and came back into his life, that his other parent was absentee, wanted nothing to do with him, cared about his siblings, blah, 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 that he had always struggled with addiction but wanted to get sober, that he had this past that he couldn't get past, but he wanted a reason to move on and he wanted a reason to get better, and yada, 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 right? And that he needed me. He needed someone like me in his life, someone who was patient and kind and loving and giving, that would be willing to support him in his emotional journey to healing. Total bullshit. But it worked. And that's what I find so compelling about narcissistic abusive cycles and narcissistic abusive behavior. When you look at a psychopath and a sociopath, right? Or you look at any other mental health disorder, you'll see some, and I'm not, to be clear, equating psychopaths, sociopaths with any other mental health disorder or vice versa. Not at all. They're all individual. They're all completely different. There are kind of standard, diagnostic criteria, right? So that's when you get the DSM-5 or the DSM-4, whatever version we're on. I think we're on 5. And you look at those, and then you have to meet certain criteria. But it's usually you have to meet 3 of 7 of these. You have to meet 4 of 6 of these. You just have to meet 1 of these in order to get these diagnoses. Now, why is that? Because everyone's experience of these things is very different, and everyone's how they exhibit these things is quite different. So you have this diagnostic criteria, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all going to act the same, like diabetics, right? Not all diabetics have the same triggers. Not all diabetics are going to be on the same medications. Not all diabetics are going to have the same outcomes of their disease, of diabetes, right? It was the same thing with mental health. But what I find so interesting is narcissists, from what my experience, and I've dealt with actually multiple narcissists and narcissistic abusive behavior, and I've been doing research since I got out on this. I've talked to others about their narcissistic abusers. What I find so fascinating is literally the response of a narcissist, the abuse cycle, every time you could chart it. It's like they have this narcissistic abuser rubric that they follow, where they're like, okay, step 1, do something shitty. Step 2, cry about it. Step 3, give a sob story or a guilt trip to the individual, your target, your victim, to make them feel bad for you. Because chances are good, if you're the narcissistic abuser and they're the empathetic victim, they're going to fall for your shit. Okay, check. I don't even know what step I'm on. 4, 5, tell them it's all their fault. Start the gaslighting. And then they're going to start gaslighting themselves. And then the final step is, tell them how much you need them in your life so that they come back, and that they're the only person in the world who you want to be with, and everything is grand, and you're going to get better, and you're going to be better, and blah, 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 blah. And that's how it works, right? So you would think, with how often this happens and how perfect they are with going through step by step, you would honestly think there was a narcissistic abuser convention that they go to where they're taught how to do this shit. So the first experience I had with the narcissistic abuse cycle was literally 1 month in or less. Right? And I believed in my mind that evil did not exist. I had no thoughts in my mind at that time that evil was just a thing, right? To me, everybody could be saved. I had experienced severe trauma in my life, and I had come out the other end, not necessarily always smelling like a rose, but I had a lot of therapy. I had gone through a lot of hard times, and I was still a very, very good person. And so in my mind, that was just where everybody was. Everyone had some degree, level of trauma. I think it was I'm trying to remember. I learned about it, but it was John Locke, or I don't know, I might be making up names right now, but there was this dynamic where someone believed that people were born evil, and then there were others that were no, everyone is born pure of heart, innocent, and then they learn to be dark and evil, right? So I was in the school of thought of babies aren't evil, children aren't evil, they're taught that way, because I love children. And so it was so hard for me to understand that children would be that way. and that they were just born like that. And then I learned later on, recently actually, is that the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath is psychopaths are born, sociopaths are made. And so I started learning this after the fact, right? But had I known this before, that evil actually does exist, and some people are just born like my abuser, like my family's abuser, I would like to believe that I would have done things different. And so that's what this video is actually about. I go through and I make these videos and I say, okay, let's turn victims into survivors. But then today, as I'm going through this experience with this individual who's talking to me, and I'm walking through it, and I'm feeling this shame and embarrassment that I didn't make a different decision from the beginning. Now, to be clear, I am very happy that I didn't, because if I had walked away, I wouldn't have my son. Now, maybe this is a way of coffee lighting myself and making myself believe that everything is okay. And that's fine. It's not going to hurt anybody for me to believe that. My son is an incredible gift, and I would never trade him for anything. And I would go through all of this all over again to have him and to have my daughter from my prior marriage. But as I started to go through this, it popped into my head. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So while I make these videos and I tell people, once you get out, this is what you might experience. If you're in, these are some resources that you can use and whatever. And those are just as valid. But it's also valid to talk about the preventative side of things, the prevention. And that goes back to, if you are in this place where you feel unworthy, you feel unlovable, you feel broken, you feel sad, you feel just lonely, like you don't know your place in the world, and you don't know why you're here, and you don't feel like you're ever going to be loved or appreciated, I love you when I say this. You're wrong. You're wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. I've said it a million times before. But the more I learn, the more I realize I know nothing at all. And I am wrong so many times, right? This whole thing has been about how I was wrong in making my decision to keep allowing this relationship to continue, even though I was the one being hurt. I was the one giving and 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 giving, while this person just took and sucked the life out of me, the finances out of me, the everything out of me, and destroyed the person that I was, and I've had to rebuild it since. So it's okay to be wrong. But if you are in this place where you feel this, it's okay to feel this too. And your feelings are valid, whether or not anybody agrees with them, whether or not you even agree with them. Your feelings are valid because your feelings are your feelings. So if you are in this place, know this: you are vulnerable. We are all, nobody is immune to this, but we are all vulnerable at some point under certain circumstances. Maybe it's around the holidays. Maybe it's around a time when something tragic happened in your life and you were emotionally raw, right? But if you are in these states of vulnerability, you are an easier target for an abuser to manipulate you and to get you to think that you need them, or they need you, and you're desirable and you're everything they've been looking for, and oh my gosh, how lucky they are to have you. Yes, they are lucky to have you, but that's not why they think they're lucky. They know they're lucky because they know their plan of how they are going to use and abuse you, right? And a person who would love to have you in their life, that aren't going to use and abuse you, they're there and they will love you just as much. And so just like as I was talking, I said there is no combination of words or anything that would make something like physical assault, sexual assault, trying to force, trying to coerce, trying to manipulate, lying, how saying sorry, having to say sorry repeatedly. No, although your feelings might be 100% valid, and although your experience might be totally justifiable in like getting you to this point of vulnerability, you don't deserve that, period. And there is nothing that you, as this vulnerable individual, can do to deserve this abusive treatment. So when we go to an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, that is 100% right in all of this. So while I will never stop fighting to turn victims into survivors, the part I was lacking is for there to not be victims to begin with. And in order for that to happen, we all have to realize that we are all potentially vulnerable. And as soon as we see the warning signs, it does not matter how beautiful that person is. It does not matter what they say to you. It doesn't matter the promises they make. None of that matters. If you feel in your gut that something is wrong, it probably is. Don't try to convince yourself, please, that it's okay or that it's justifiable that you're being treated this way. Don't try to make up excuses for this individual later on or in the beginning. If from the moment you see it, take a partner, go to a best friend, go to a therapist, go to a freaking coffee shop and talk to the barista that you trust. It doesn't matter. Get a sounding board. It's very much like coding. If you look into like coding and like the cyber world and stuff, there is this concept of the rubber duck, right? And the rubber duck, I've never used it in this way, but I call people my rubber ducks because I use them in that way for other things. But the rubber duck is basically, my understanding is, if you are writing code and you're kind of stuck, you're kind of blocked, and you can't, like reader's block or writer's block, but it's like coding block. Programmers used to, or maybe they still do, have a rubber duck on their desk. And what they would do is they would talk to that rubber duck. And they would talk through their code and what they're trying to do. And that rubber duck was there just for them to hear themselves and for them to work through the problem out loud. Because the voice you hear in your head is different than the voice you hear when you speak, right? Not only in tone, but in the way you hear yourself, the way your brain processes that, right? So that's why a lot of times people read out loud, or they talk out loud, they think out loud, they do all these things. It's a totally different way you experience your reality and your thoughts. So if at any point, please, if nothing else, if at any point you are in any kind of relationship, whether it be a romantic relationship with a potential romantic partner, a friendship, you are volunteering for an organization that you think is potentially becoming toxic, you are working for a company and you have a manager or a colleague or a skip level manager or whatever that you think is possibly becoming toxic or abusive, get yourself either a literal rubber duck or find a person who can serve as your rubber duck. Talk to yourself on recording, right? Like I'm recording myself right now. Talk to yourself on recording and then play it back for yourself. What are you hearing? Take that partner and make sure you are making a decision that is clear of mind, because when you're vulnerable, you're not thinking straight. Nobody does. I don't care who you are. I don't care how many times you've been through this. Even now, if I am in a place where I'm like, something doesn't feel right, I have multiple rubber ducks in my life. I have a literal rubber duck here at my house, and then I have friends and family who I know I can trust with different things. Get that person. It doesn't matter who it is. Get that therapist, get that person, get that recording on your thing, on your device. Get that rubber duck for yourself, whatever. But please, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You don't have to be a victim that becomes a survivor, or a victim that unfortunately never makes it out. You can prevent yourself from becoming a victim at all, either for the first time or again. Share this with other people. You don't even have to share the video, just share the knowledge if you feel like it will work. Share it with others so that they know that they have a choice. No combination of anything will ever make it okay for somebody to take advantage of you, for somebody to hurt you, no matter what. If you are in a situation where that is happening and they're saying, oh, it's your fault, no, it is not. No, it is not. And if you are literally just like using words and you're not, even if you're using like not so nice words, right? Like you're arguing back or you're getting mouthy. Okay. There is literally nothing that anybody could say to me that would result in me hitting them or hurting them or taking advantage of them. it's just not going to happen. I literally am just not going to do that unless I am faced with certain physical harm, or my children, someone I love, or an innocent is faced with certain physical harm. I'm never going to take that step. I'm never going to force somebody into a sexual interaction that they don't want to have. I'm never going to force someone to even have a conversation with me if they don't want to have a conversation with me, right? That is afforded to every single person. Your physical autonomy, your spiritual autonomy, your mental health, your physical, all these things, they're yours. They are your universe given rights as a human being to make these decisions for you. And no matter what they say, it will always be that way. So thank you for sticking through this. Again, just focus on, please, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Let's get all the victims out that we can now, right? Let's turn as many victims into survivors, if not all of them now. But let's also work as a society, as a community, to prevent just perfectly beautiful individuals from becoming victims in the first place. I thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment if you so choose, and let's save some lives together. Thank you.